Welcome to another episode of Mike Reads. Tonight we'll be continuing our series on Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations with our fourth read in Book 5, Chapter 1, Part 3. Chapter 1 entitled, Of the Expenses of the Sovereign or Commonwealth, and Part 3 entitled, Of the Expense of Public Works and Public Institutions. Part 3 is very long and is then subdivided into several articles. I'll let you all know when I get to the beginning or end of an article. We should be able to wrap up Article 1 with today's read. And we had a bit of a bad stopping point with the previous read. So just as a refresher, we were in the middle of Adam Smith's critique of, at the time, the East India Company's failures to be good stewards towards their stock. So I'm going to just, for the sake of context, rewind one paragraph so you guys can follow along more easily. So without further ado, but if the company, this is the East India Company he's talking about, but if the company were bad stewards and bad sovereigns when the whole of their net revenue and profits belonged to themselves and were at their own disposal, they were surely not likely to be better when 3/4 of them were to belong to other people and the other fourth, though to be laid out for the benefit of the company, yet to be so, under the inspection and with the approbation of other people. It might be more agreeable to the company that their own servants and dependents should have either the pleasure of wasting or the profit of embezzling whatever surplus might remain after paying the proposed dividend of 8%, than that it should come into the hands of a set of people with whom those resolutions could scarce fail to set them, in some measures, at variance. The interest of those servants and dependents might so far predominate in the court of proprietors as sometimes to dispose it to support the authors of depredations which had been committed in direct violation of its own authority. With the majority of proprietors, the support even of the authority of their own court might sometimes be a matter of less consequence than the support of those who had set that authority at defiance. The regulations of 1773, accordingly, did not put an end to the disorders of the company's government in India. Notwithstanding that, during a momentary fit of good conduct, they had at one time collected into the treasury of Calcutta more than 3 million sterling, notwithstanding that they had afterwards extended either their dominion or their depredations over a vast extension of some of the richest and most fertile countries in India, all was wasted and destroyed. They found themselves altogether unprepared to stop or resist the incursion of Hyder Ali, and, in consequence of the disorders, the company is now, as of 1784, in greater distress than ever, and in order to prevent immediate bankruptcy, is once more reduced to supplicate the assistance of government. Different plans have been proposed by different parties in Parliament for the better management of its affairs, and all those plans seem to agree in supposing what was indeed always abundantly evident, that it is altogether unfit to govern its territorial possessions. Even the company itself seems to be convinced of its own incapacity so far, and seems, upon that account, willing to give them up to government. With the right of possessing forts and garrisons in distant and barbarous countries is necessarily connected the right of making peace and war in those countries. The joint stock companies which have had the one right have constantly exercised the other, and have frequently had it expressly conferred upon them. How unjustly, how capriciously, how cruelly they have commonly exercised it is too well known from recent experience. When a company of merchants undertake, at their own risk and expense, to establish a new trade with some remote and barbarous nation, it may not be unreasonable to incorporate them into a joint stock company, and to grant them, in case of their success, a monopoly of the trade for a certain number of years. It is the easiest and most natural way in which the state can recompense them for hazarding a dangerous and expensive experiment, of which the public is afterwards to reap the benefit. A temporary monopoly of this kind may be vindicated upon the same principles upon which a like monopoly of a new machine is granted to its inventor, and that of a new book to its author. But upon the expiration of the term, the monopoly ought certainly to determine the forts and garrisons, if it was found necessary to establish any, to be taken into the hands of government, their value to be paid to the company, and the trade to be laid open to all subjects of the state. But a perpetual monopoly, by a perpetual monopoly, all the other subjects of the state are taxed very absurdly in two different ways. First, by the high price of goods, which, in the case of a free trade, they could buy much cheaper, and secondly, by their total exclusion from a branch of business, which it might be both convenient and profitable for many of them to carry on. It is for the most worthless of all purposes, too, that they are taxed in this manner. It is merely to enable the company to support the negligence, profusion, and malversation of their own servants, whose disorderly conduct seldom allows the dividend of the company to exceed the ordinary rate of profits in trades which are altogether free, and very frequently makes it fall even a good deal short of that rate. Without a monopoly, however, a joint stock company, it would appear from experience, cannot long carry on any branch of foreign trade. To buy in one market in order to sell with profit in another, when there are many competitors in both, to watch over not only the occasional variations in the demand, but the much greater and more frequent variations in the competition, or in the supply which that demand is likely to get from other people, and to suit with dexterity and judgment both the quantity and quality of each assortment of goods to all these circumstances, is a species of warfare of which the operations are continually changing, and which can scarce ever be conducted successfully without such an unremitting exertion of vigilance and attention as cannot long be expected from the directors of a joint stock company. The East India Company, upon the redemption of their funds and the expiration of their exclusive privilege, have a right, by Act of Parliament, to continue a corporation with a joint stock and to trade in their corporate capacity to the East Indies in common with the rest of their fellow subjects. But in this situation, the superior vigilance and attention of private adventurers would, in all probability, soon make them weary of the trade. An eminent French author, of great knowledge in matters of political economy, the Abbé Morellet, gives a list of 55 joint stock companies for foreign trade, which have been established in different parts of Europe since the year 1600, and which, according to him, have all failed from mismanagement, notwithstanding they had exclusive privileges. He has been misinformed with regard to the history of 2 or 3 of them, which were not joint stock companies and have not failed. But in compensation, there have been several joint stock companies which have failed, and which he has omitted. The only trades which it seems possible for a joint stock company to carry on successfully without any exclusive privilege are those of which all the operations are capable of being reduced to what is called a routine, or to such a uniformity of method as admits of little or no variation. Of this kind is, first, the banking trade, secondly, the trade of insurance from fire and from sea risk and capture in time of war, thirdly, the trade of making and maintaining a navigable cut or canal, and fourthly, the similar trade of bringing water for the supply of a great city. Though the principles of the banking trade may appear somewhat abstruse, the practice is capable of being reduced to strict rules. To depart upon any occasion from those rules, in consequence of some flattering speculation of extraordinary gain, is almost always extremely dangerous, and frequently fatal to the banking company which attempts it. But the constitution of joint stock companies renders them in general more tenacious of established rules than any private copartnery. Such companies, therefore, seem extremely well fitted for this trade. The principal banking companies in Europe, accordingly, are joint stock companies, many of which manage their trade very successfully without any exclusive privilege. The Bank of England has no other exclusive privilege, except that no other banking company in England shall consist of more than 6 persons. The 2 banks of Edinburgh are joint stock companies without any exclusive privilege. The value of the risk, either from fire or from loss by sea or by capture, though it cannot, perhaps, be calculated very exactly, admits, however, of such a gross estimation as renders it, in some degree, reducible to strict rule and method. The trade of insurance, therefore, may be carried on successfully by a joint stock company without any exclusive privilege. Neither the London Assurance nor the Royal Exchange Assurance companies have any such privilege. When a navigable cut or canal has been once made, the management of it becomes quite simple and easy and is reducible to strict rule and method. Even the making of it is so, as it may be contracted for with undertakers at so much a mile and so much a lock. The same thing may be said of a canal, an aqueduct, or a great pipe for bringing water to supply a great city. Such undertakings, therefore, may be, and accordingly frequently are, very successfully managed by joint stock companies without any exclusive privilege. To establish a joint stock company, however, for any undertaking merely because such a company might be capable of managing it successfully, or to exempt a particular set of dealers from some of the general laws which take place with regard to all their neighbors, merely because they might be capable of thriving if they had such an exemption, would certainly not be reasonable. To render such an establishment perfectly reasonable, with the circumstance of being reducible to strict rule and method, two other circumstances ought to concur. First, it ought to appear with the clearest evidence that the undertaking is of greater and more general utility than the greater part of common trades, and secondly, that it requires a greater capital than can easily be collected into a private copartnery. If a moderate capital were sufficient, the great utility of the undertaking would not be a sufficient reason for establishing a joint stock company, because in this case, the demand for it was to produce would readily and easily be supplied by private adventurers. In the four trades above mentioned, both those circumstances concur. The great and general utility of the banking trade, when prudently managed, has been fully explained in the second book of this inquiry. But a public bank which is to support public credit, and upon public emergencies to advance to government the whole produce of a tax to the amount, perhaps, of several millions, a year or two before it comes in, requires a greater capital than can easily be collected into any private copartnery. The trade of insurance gives great security to the fortunes of private people, and by dividing among a great many that loss which would ruin an individual, makes it fall light and easy upon the whole society. In order to give this security, however, it is necessary that the insurer should have a very large capital. Before the establishment of the two joint stock companies for insurance in London, a list, as it is said, was laid before the Attorney General of 150 private insurers who had failed in the course of a few years. The navigable cuts and canals, and the works which are sometimes necessary for supplying a great city with water, are of great and general utility, while at the same time they frequently require a greater expense than suits the fortunes of private people, is sufficiently obvious. Except the four trades mentioned above, I have not been able to recollect any other in which all the three circumstances requisite for rendering reasonable the establishment of a joint stock company concur. The English Copper Company of London, the Lead Smelting Company, the Glass Grinding Company, have not even the pretext of any great or singular utility in the object which they pursue. Nor does the pursuit of that object seem to require any expense unsuitable to the fortunes of many private men. Whether the trade which those companies carry on is reducible to such strict rule and method as to render it fit for the management of a joint stock company, or whether they have any reason to boast of their extraordinary profits, I do not pretend to know. The Mine Adventurers Company has been long ago bankrupt. A share in the stock of the British Linen Company of Edinburgh sells, at present, very much below par, though less so than it did some years ago. The joint stock companies which are established for the public-spirited purpose of promoting some particular manufacturer over and above managing their own affairs ill to the diminution of the general stock of the society, can in other respects scarce ever fail to do more harm than good. Notwithstanding the most upright intentions, the unavoidable partiality of their directors to particular branches of the manufacture, of which the undertakers mislead and impose upon them, is a real discouragement to the rest, and necessarily breaks, more or less, that natural proportion which would otherwise establish itself between judicious industry and profit, and which, to the general industry of the country, is of all encouragements the greatest and most effectual. All right. That actually concludes that article. That would be the first article of Chapter 1, Part 3. We'll continue on with this read in Article 2, which will be entitled, Of the Expense of the Institutions for the Education of Youth. So until then, this has been Mike, signing off.